Hi everyone, this is Yana Smakula and thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm sharing a ridiculously easy way to add dry embossed texture to a background. I'm also making masculine Valentine's Day cards today, although this technique can be easily applied to cards for any occasion. Here's a quick look at the card I just finished. As I tilt it in the light, you can see the dry embossed detail on the white background paper. I'll show you how you can easily add this kind of linear detail to any project. Before I add any dry embossed detail to my white background panel, I need to do my stamping. The idea is to avoid adding the dry embossing to the area where you have a stamped image. And this is actually the beauty of this technique, because really you can dry emboss with anything as long as you have a die cutting machine. You can dry emboss with dies, embossing folders, die cuts, stencils, even little pieces of paper. But the technique I'll share today doesn't require the use of a die cutting machine and lets you do selective dry embossing. I want to stamp several clouds from the new Hero Arts Cherub stamp set. I will later add the little angels, and I need them to float in the clouds. I'm using the perfect color of ink for this, Soft Sky from Hero Arts, and I'm stamping both small and large clouds, forming a little cloud cluster. I'm overlapping my clouds a little bit to make sure that they look a little bit more organic. Now, of course, clouds are white and it's the sky that's blue, but I'm making my clouds blue today. Now I can add my dry embossed detail. All you need to be able to do this is a bone folder and a scoring board. These, I feel, are must-haves for any card makers, as all of our cards really start with a neatly folded card bases. I'm using a mini scoring board from Martha Stewart today, but any scoring board will do. The card that I completed previously has diagonal score lines added in both directions, forming diamonds. And you can do this by placing your paper at an angle on your scoring board and taping it down so that you don't have to hold it all the time. And that's why I have little pieces of washi tape on my scoring board. I use them to tape this panel. You can add score lines however you like and as far or as close apart as you prefer. I've been adding mine 1/2 inch apart, and here's another background I did where I added score lines going just horizontally 1/2 inch apart. I did not add any stamping to this panel as I actually want to use it later. I'm not using it today. And if you do not add any stamping, you can actually use both embossed and debossed side of your paper. So let's go ahead and add this scored detail. I want my lines on this card to go horizontally, so I'm placing my paper this way in my scoring board and we'll go ahead and begin scoring at 1/2 inch intervals. I'm starting with a very light hand, and I'm increasing the pressure as I go over the embossed line the second and third time. When I get to the clouds, I'm pausing and I'm going very carefully. I'm avoiding the cloud area and only scoring around the clouds. This can be a little bit tiring on the wrist, all of this scoring, so I suggest you use thinner paper to make it easier to hand emboss it. And if you think about it, this really is a very old technique that was around before the die cutting machines and embossing folders became popular. Now everybody can easily dry emboss just about anything onto the background, but I think it's fun to be able to add embossing around your stamped images, and you can't really always do that with embossing folders. And next I'm going to stamp angels to float in the clouds, and I'm using Pull to Navy ombre ink pad from Hero Arts. I love to use ombre ink pads for solid images like these, and this Pull to Navy is actually my very first ombre ink pad. It's a little bit on the dry side too, as I've been using it non-stop for several years now. So I'm triple stamping my images just to be sure that they have the darkest impression or the most vivid impression possible. There are coordinating dies available for these images, so I'm using them to cut these out for my card. I have my die cutting machine sitting off to the side, so I'm not showing it on video. I actually need just 2 of the angels, and I'm not cutting the third one out. I'll save it for another project. Before I adhere my angels onto the background, I'm going to trim my panel down 1/4 inch on each side, so to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And I wanted to also mention these leftover strips. They do look rather fun, and I think they would make up a great addition to another card. So I'm going to save these leftovers for another project. I'm not tossing them. I'm also going to create a deep blue ink blended panel to place behind my dry embossed panel for my card. I want this panel to match in color to my stamping, so I'm using the exact same ombre ink pad and blending this beautiful navy color around the edges of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white cardstock panel, and this is going to cover the entire front of my card. I do not need to ink blend the entire panel, I'm just ink blending the edges, as this is what's going to be visible on my project. This is the perfect trick for making your own paper that matches in color to your stamping. It is a little bit time consuming, but we want everything to match, right? To adhere my dry embossed panel, I'm using fun foam. I want this panel to have a solid layer under it. The dry embossing did make it a little bit flimsy, so to make this panel stable again, I'm adding a sheet of fun foam, cut just a little bit smaller than my panel. And now I can go ahead and foam mount my angels onto the card. I also need to add a sentiment, and I'm going with a very simple one that reads, "Forever Yours." I'm heat embossing it in white embossing powder onto a black cardstock strip, and this sentiment also comes from the Cherub stamp set from Hero Arts. I'm going to cut it out or trim it slightly differently. I wanted to have different edges cut at an angle, just like so. I think this adds a modern look to this card. I'm using black foam tape to foam mount this strip in place, and I always use black foam adhesive if I'm adhering something that is black onto a white background. This just makes the adhesive less visible. One more thing that this card needs is sequins. I have this stunning frost sequin mix from Hero Arts, and I'm going to embellish my card using a few white and blue sequins from here. Now, this video is a part of a Hero Arts blog hop celebrating the release of their Valentine's Day products. Be sure to visit my blog to hop along and see more inspiration and more Valentine's Day products from Hero Arts. There is a link to my blog in the video description. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't yet done so. If you are subscribed but are not receiving new video notifications, please check the bell icon on the homepage of my channel to get notified every time there is a new video published. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!